Okay, so today we're gonna take a look at It Could Happen to You by Jimmy van Heusen. Heusen? Not sure how to pronounce his name. So what I wanna look at today is how do you improvise over this tune? We're gonna learn the tune, but how do you solo over a tune like this, a standard like this? So there are three things, I think, that need to happen. One, you need to be able to outline harmony, outline the chord changes so that you can hear the chords go by even if nobody's playing them. Your lines should kind of outline the chords. So we're gonna take a look at how you can do that and how you can practice that. But I have made so many videos where I go into this, so I'm just gonna talk about it a little bit. And then you also need to incorporate some jazz vocabulary, some jazz language, meaning licks, idiomatic phrases. So we're gonna look at some of that as well. But then the third thing that needs to happen, I think, is that you kind of need to let go of all that stuff and just kind of play. And we're gonna look at some techniques that I use to practice not doing any of that stuff I just mentioned earlier. So all that stuff, but first let's just learn a tune and let's get started, shall we? So I have a backing track here I found online. It's called It Could Happen to You, chord progression, jazz backing track, and the YouTube channel is called Backing Tracks Jazz. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. That's how most people play. You often hear this tune, or you often play it in G major as well. There are some slight variations on these changes. Some people play diminished here and diminished here. And here, instead of G split, it's often D flat 7 to C7. I prefer the G minor 7 flat 5. And the diminished chord, what bebop musicians did, they replaced that with 2/5. Function the same way, and it's more kind of bebop to play the 2/5s, and it's more early jazz to play the diminished chord. But they are up for grabs. It doesn't really matter that much. If you are thinking 2/5 and the piano player is playing a diminished chord or vice versa, it's gonna sound pretty good. So as I said, the first thing that we need to be able to do is to outline these chords in our lines. And how do you do that? The first most obvious thing is to just play the chord tones. So we're not really making music, right? You're just practicing that. And I have talked about this in many videos, so I'm not gonna go into detail. If you wanna look at some of that stuff, I have a video where I do chord tones over Autumn Leaves, for example. So just type my name and chord tones, and you'll get many videos if you want to look at this some more. But if we just do that over this backing track, it's gonna sound like this. Diminished. you can notice, it's pretty easy to do this for me because I've practiced this stuff a lot. But this is not, doing that is not, enough. You have to be able to use voice leading. All this stuff I'm showing you, the goal is to be able to use voice leading, so go from one chord to the next with the smoothest. And also use be able to use arpeggios to make them sound like motifs. So being able to connect the chord tone to the next is the challenge here. And of course, this takes a lot of work. Another technique is to use bop scales. Same thing here. You can type in my name and bop scales and you will get many videos. Each chord type has a bop scale that works over that chord. So you have to know a little bit of music theory, right? So that you know that on a major chord, I play a major scale with an added flat 6. And on the dominant chords, I play a mixo flat 2 flat 6 with an added 7. And on the dominant chords and the minor chords, we play mixolydian bop scale. I'm moving kind of fast here because as I said, I've explained this in many videos, and I'm kind of talking to those who follow my channel and know how bop scales work. And then there is one bop scale you use for minor chords when it's a tonic minor chord. If I do that over this, hopefully you can hear the chords go by, right? This is pretty fast, so I don't know if I can do it over this tempo. We shall see. Here it's even more a challenge to be able to connect, to play these over the bar lines. That's really a challenge. Then there are other ways of doing both of these exercises. There are other ways to play chord tones. Barry Harris has his own thing with the bop scales, the way he does it. But if you can do this, what I just did, that's a lot. The problem with this stuff is that it doesn't sound like music. It's just grammar. We haven't started talking the new language yet. We're just learning grammar, right? But the better you know grammar, the easier it's gonna get learning the language later on, right? So we wanna make sure that we really have this stuff under our fingers and in our ears and all that stuff. There's another way you can outline harmony, which is pretty obvious. It's to play the chords. And we're just gonna play 2-note voicings. So the guide tones on the middle strings. This is also something I talk about in a lot of my videos. So just the 3rd and the 7th of each chord. Of course, you could add bass notes to this. Or you could add extensions above. That's a little bit too. Right? But we're just gonna play those 2 guide tones that guide us through the harmony. And I'm gonna use a metronome. This is very important that you have a metronome on beat 2 and 4. And then just gonna play these guide tones. so on and so forth. Then what I want you to do is do that and try to play something between in the spaces. Very small rhythmic ideas. Let's just try it. 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason I want you to practice like this is because this forces you to constantly be aware of what chord you are on at all time. This is the problem with a lot of students. I find that they just kind of play and they think about the scale or whatever, but they don't know exactly what chord they are on. And even if they do this, the risk is that you're just kind of memorizing a pattern after a while. But this chord stab technique, you don't have to play all the chords, you can leave some out. It forces you to constantly be aware of what chord you're on, and also you develop the habit of throwing in some chords every now and then, which is nice. It also forces you to play very sparse. You could also use these guide tones to play lines, to play them as lines. So I have to think constantly what chord I'm on when I'm doing that, which is, it should be kind of second nature after a while, that you just know. So now what you need to do is to incorporate some jazz language. So how do you learn jazz language? You transcribe solos and learn licks and stuff like that. You can learn from books. And if you follow my channel, you probably bought a lot of books that I have covered. And maybe though some of the books are just sitting on the shelf. So we're gonna pull out some books. This one, In the Style, Essential Jazz Lines in the Style of Charlie Parker. The complete book of jazz guitar lines and phrases by Sid Jacobs. Those are some good places to start. And then I'm gonna take some licks from these books. This first lick, I can't even remember what book I got it from, but it's this. I think it's from Line Games, Randy Vincent book, I'm not sure. That's why it's a good idea to, when you use these books, mark down the stuff that you like, so that you can remember, because then when you go through the book, you see, here's a lick that I liked, so I probably still like it. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna play these guide tones, and then I'm just gonna insert that lick on the 2/5 at the end of each section. So here, right? So I inserted that lick in a place where it works. So it's pretty easy to find 2/5/1 licks. You can find tons of material for 2/5/1 licks. But there are many other chord progressions in jazz other than 2/5/1s. So for example, the beginning of this tune, is a very common progression, and we need an arsenal of licks that we can use over those chord progressions as well. So now I'm taking some stuff from this book, Jazz Improvisation for Guitar, A Harmonic Approach by Garrison Fuel. Mispronouncing his last name. It's Berkeley Press. The good thing about this book is that it covers a lot of different chord progressions we find in jazz, not just the 2-5-1. So here is the lick that work over these chords. So then I incorporate that. Let's take a very Charlie Parker sounding lick from this Essential Jazz Lines in the style of Charlie Parker. Let's take this lick here. It's on page 30. So I transpose that. Very Charlie Parker. So now I have another lick I can use. So 1, 2, 3, and... right back into the stabs. So that's the thing, you need to keep going. You need to kind of play the lick, and ultimately you want to be able to kind of manipulate the lick, move it around, shift it, to change the notes around, and don't just always start playing on beat 1 and all this stuff. But now we're kind of learning, right? Depending on how advanced you are. So if you use these books, and you can use this this book by Steve Jacobs, the complete book of jazz guitar lines and phrases, you will find tons of stuff that work over. And let's actually take a phrase from here. Let's take a major line. So a line, this book has like different jazz idiomatic phrases that work over different chords. So here is a... So I transpose that to E flat. Now I have another lick that I can use. It works over the diminished chord, right? Going into the diminished chord. Because both those notes belong to the next chord as well. That's something you have to look at as well. Like playing licks could work over different chords. So let's go back to the backing track. Now I have a few licks that I could mix and match. That's another idiomatic phrase that you will find in this book. It's a phrase that you can use over different chords. To create or to outline the harmony of the two. So here's the thing. I will sometimes have a student who will do all this stuff, and then it's like, yeah, I still feel like I can't do anything. I practice this stuff you tell me to do, and the chord tones, the bob scales, the jazz idiomatic phrases, I can do all of that. But then I go to play with real situation, jazz gig or jams or whatever, and nothing comes out in a good way. It's just doesn't work. So a couple of things you need to realize here. One, if you are doing this and you have now we have 2 licks, you have to understand that you need like 1,000 of these licks. And then, you know, it's going to start to kind of, your instinct is going to take over when you're playing. You need to be able to know these arpeggios inside and out. You need to transcribe tons of solos. You need to work on your time feel, on your swing feel. You need to work on your tone, your technique. This is just a little aspect of all that it takes to be a good jazz musician. Somebody took, I can't remember, somebody said they took a lesson with Mike Sterner if they went to his apartment or his house or whatever, and it was just like the whole floor was just covered with music, manuscript paper with notation, and he had like licks and ideas, just page after page. That's the mindset of a jazz musician, right? You're constantly working on licks and ideas. One of the reasons why you're not feeling that you still can't play, it's not that your practicing is wrong, it's just that you still kind of need to develop more vocabulary. But you can also practice in a way where you kind of let all of this stuff go. Because when you go up on the stage on the bandstand, you don't want to be thinking about, oh, here's a lick, here's a bob scale. All that stuff shouldn't be even, you shouldn't even be thinking about that stuff, right? It's like I'm not thinking about grammar when I speak. You should just be reacting to what's happening. What are this drummer or bass player doing? And you just should be just kind of getting into a flow. So we're going to practice that. Right, so imagine that you practice this stuff, you're in your shed and you're practicing your arpeggios, and then you go to your gig or you play with real musicians and they say, what do you want to play? And say, it could happen to you, and then you go, okay, let's go, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you realize, oh, they have started, what's going on? Maybe the bass player is just like pedaling and the drummer is like, go. You know, if you go, right? But you still need to be able to do that because that's the foundation. And you still need to know where you are in the tune, even if the bass player is doing this. So we're gonna practice like that. I'm just gonna play like this. So a pedal could be the fifth or the root. We're gonna pedal on the fifth. So imagine you get to the end of the tune, right? So, very common, and then just imagine you could keep going. So if I make a loop like this, E flat over B flat, and then A flat over B flat, so B flat sus. So E flat major. Actually, I'm gonna use a metronome. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, if you solo over this, you could play more modally. You could play patterns, which we're going to do next. But I still, maybe you're noticing I'm thinking about the melody. I have the melody in my head, and I'm still aware of the chord changes that are supposed to be there, so that I could imply those, and I don't get lost, because it's easy to get lost when you do this, and you can't get lost. You could practice your patterns, maybe thirds, up and down the whole neck. I like to do patterns like this. So that's a third with the chromatic, or maybe just one chromatic approach note. We're here, right? There it starts over. So I have developed, and I'm sure a lot of you too have this, where you can just feel where it is like when it starts over, because you're so used to these. It's often the same, so you can. I don't have to count, but I keep the melody somewhere in my consciousness when I'm playing. This, of course, can open up to more outside playing as well, because they will often do this. It can open the door to diminished harmony, right? The half whole. So G over B flat. Some people even do this. Or this. E over B flat, which is also from diminished harmony. It could be like pentatonic stuff. It's the end of each kind of section where there's more tension, right? Here, and it starts over. So that's where you can use tension. This is just pentatonic, E flat pentatonic. Maybe here. There's certain places where it creates more tension, but the real masters like Shikuria and those people, they don't even care about that. They create tension anywhere they want. But at first you need to develop this ability to create tension at the end of each form. That's another exercise I want you to do, is to play, there are like two bob scales in a key like this. The one on the tonic and the one on the dominant. So a major bob scale and the dominant mixolydian bob scale. So they sound good on this. And then you can do this. You can play an arpeggio and then bob scale from whatever note that is. You do a chromatic leading note into the arpeggio, which is a triplet. So if I do this arpeggio, that note is a D, which means I'm gonna play the B flat mixo. If I do the F minor arpeggio, that's an E flat, so I'm gonna play an E flat major bob scale. Right, like this. play the E triad, which is from the diminished harmony or altered. This is something I picked up from Jesse Van Ruler. He always does this. It's like an E triad, but with a B flat. B flat, E triad. B flat, E triad. It could be a triad coupling. So if you haven't never watched any of my videos before, you might be a little bit confused by all this. So this is stuff that I have covered in previous videos. This video is a little bit of a summary of a lot of stuff that I've talked about for my subscribers and my viewers, if you think that I'm moving a little bit fast here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do all this stuff that I just showed you over the backing track where they play the normal changes. And I think you will agree that it sounds pretty decent. So I'm not going to think about the changes too much, because that's the problem. When you're practicing these outlining harmony techniques, if you do that too much, it's going to sound like you're trying too hard if you're outlining every chord. So there's a little bit of a paradox here. I'm asking you to practice this stuff, and you should be able to outline harmony. You should be a master at that. But when you're playing, don't think about that. So, because what happens is you try to outline every harmony. It's not how you play. So we're practicing in a way to forget that stuff, if that makes sense. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't practice. This comes after. Okay, so maybe just some patterns. That's like Papathini. Remember the bob scale thing with arpeggios? So I'm not even outlining those chords now, but it sounds good because most of those notes, if you think about this C7 for example, if I play an E flat major, most of those notes kind of work. The note that you should play is that, if you want to outline that chord, is the D flat, right? The flat 9 and the major 3rd. All the other notes are the same pretty much. So my point is that a lot of the notes are gonna sound good, but if you have strong ears and some awareness of what the note is that you're playing and the chord you're on, you're not gonna land on a bad note. So you could basically just play E flat major over the whole tune. The 4 minor and the flat 7, I don't even think is in the real version. So if you're ignoring those chords, this is called harmonic generalization. You're just kind of ignoring the 4 minor, just playing E flat major. Especially at the faster tempo, it's no one's going to notice. It's not the point that nobody's going to notice. It's that it's not important to outline every chord. You should be able to, but again, if you do it too much, it's overkill. Of course, there are many patterns that you could try, and you can try some maybe at more advanced. Jonathan Kreisberg, some more modern stuff, if you have some of that stuff. Then you mix that with arpeggios. Maybe some patterns. Pentatonics. And then some of the jazz licks. That wasn't the lick. That was the lick. See, you really need to have this stuff down, be able to pull it off just when I'm practicing. And when you're actually playing, it's even more intense, right? When you're playing in a gig or whatever. So you need to have this stuff really under your fingers and all that stuff. So I'm gonna leave you with one more thing you can do. This is iReal Pro, and I took the chords to It Could Happen to You, and I did an E flat pedal, and then I just played like the triad of the chord over that pedal. So the first one is E flat over E flat, then C over E flat, F minor over E flat, D over E flat, A flat over E flat, G is diminished over E flat, which is just E flat 7, C over E flat. So the chord over the pedal, and then I changed the swing to an even 8, and then you get this modern sound. Those were the normal chords, just to give it variation. And the last 4 is gonna be altered or diminished. Just E over B flat. Here you can go crazy. And that's some normal stuff. Maybe this lick. So that kind of practicing, you're still playing the tune, but you're a completely different headspace. And this is kind of, I think, how some players treat standards in a more modern way. Ironically, by playing simpler with triads. And then you can practice your big intervallic if you have some of that stuff will fit better than if you're playing in a swing. It's harder to get those kind of Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mike Marino, that stuff fits this kind of style better. What a lot of students do wrong, I think, is that they like Kurt Rosenwinkel and Mike Marino and Jonathan Kreisberg and that stuff, and they want to play like that. But they don't understand that those players know all this stuff I talked about. They can do all that stuff, and they have that stuff. They have kind of just moved on. So what the student does is they try to learn like a really fancy Kurt Rosenwinkel arpeggio or something, but they can't play chord tones over Stella by Starlight. And then they try to play that huge arpeggio or something, right? It's not gonna work. Kurt Rosenwinkel developed that language on top of being able to play standards, you know, like well in the style, in the tradition. At least I think so. But yeah, I digress. So this was a lot of stuff. If you're still watching, wow. And all this stuff is on my Patreon page, of course. And as always, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.